Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your host, Sylvie from the Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast. And geez, can you imagine? January is almost over and February is here. I have this sinking feeling that this year is absolutely going to fly by based on what's gone on already. Do you feel the same or what? So, this is pretty exciting leading into February, which is going to lead into our big celebration for our 200th episode, which is going to be on March 11th. I'm so excited. I cannot believe it. But here's the thing. We have decided, or I have decided to, there's no we here actually, I have decided to giveaways every week. So we're going to be giving away a prize to a lucky listener on Friday. And what I've done is I've actually partnered with some of my guests that have been on the podcast who have either physical products or sell other wholesale products on their store. And we've collaborated and we're going to be doing a little exchange just to get more of you guys actually looking at them and just giving out some really cool cycling gear. So I hope you're super excited about that because I am. So here's the thing. This is how you can win. First, you need to stop and go to Apple Podcast and write a review. So that's number one. Number two, while you're there, leave a 5-star rating and then follow the podcast on social media on Instagram. But here's the thing. When you go to write your review, please put down your Instagram handle, because I did challenges before where I was giving away prizes for reviews and some people put these names down that I could never find them anywhere. So if you want to be found for a giveaway, then please make sure you write your Instagram handle as part of your review. Thank you. So then I can find you. Now, that being said, I have 2 grand prizes that are going to happen on the 20th episode day. Now, the first one is going to be given out to one of the winners of our weekly draws. The next one, I'm going to go into everybody who's put in their reviews, and I want to thank you in advance, and I'm going to pull a winner from there. And so that's how it's going to work. So make sure you follow the podcast because I'm going to be talking about this a lot, and that's where I'm going to put all the posting for the winners. Next, remember, a review and rating. You have to have all 3 of those things done to be recognized for the draw. So with that, I hope you have an amazing day. And I just want to give you a little heads up. If you went in and got some of my free downloads before, I put a new cycling snacks PDF in there to try for some different things for your training and your riding. So with that, have an amazing day. You be amazing, and I'll see you in the podcast. Enjoy the next episode. Welcome to Secrets from the Saddle podcast. I'm Sylvie, your host, fellow cyclist, bike club founder, cycling coach, bike race junkie, just truly super passionate about cycling. My journey with cycling started 20 years ago when I opened a spin studio, started a women's race team, and founded a women's only cycling club called Cycle Fit Chicks. I'm super thrilled to reveal all aspects that make the world of cycling operate. I'm so excited to be able to bring you interesting people from around the world, pro cyclists, recreational cyclists, coaches, event organizers, bike shop owners, everything and everyone you need to know or ever wondered about when it comes to cycling. I know you'll enjoy this episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie Deo. And I have a really super interesting individual from Bristol, UK, or I don't know, would you say UK? Just Bristol. It's in the UK. And Stephen Fox has a franchise called Fox Cycling, wrapped around teaching kids how to ride their bikes. Now, before we bring Steve out, here's a little bit about on his background. So Steve's a Fox, a cycling nut, kids sports coach and entrepreneur, recognized that there are three main barriers to children not cycling. So he designed a fun, active-based methodology to get kids cycling safely in an hour. Now I know my kids took a little bit more than an hour, maybe pushing them around, but anyways, it quickly became very popular and exposed a very unique and exciting gap in the child development and family health sector. Since 2010, Fox Cycling has taught thousands of kids to ride so many, to cycle. So many more families can ride together. The fun, progressive learning system has been further refined and developed over time, and that is where his franchise comes in. Now, welcome, Steve, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And for all you folks out there listening, thank you for listening. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Thank you for listening. Now, I always love to get started in, well, how did you get into cycling? How did it migrate to what you're doing today? Because I think it's absolutely amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. So how did I get into cycling? Well, the inspiration for cycling and the inspiration for Fox Cycling, my franchise, has to be down to my granddad. My granddad called Jack Fox, an amazing bloke. When I was really young, I remember my granddad was a very keen cyclist. He had lots and lots of bikes lying around. And I think he recognized that at a young age, like many children, I was struggling to learn to cycle. He I remember, cobbled together some kind of old little sort of Frankenstein looking kind of bike. But it was a real help, and it really helped me build my confidence and my love for cycling. He used to take me out and about, and I used to follow him on my various little bikes growing up. So he was a real inspiration, and cycling was a real connection with what I really yearned for at that age, and I still do, which is about fresh air and freedom and adventure, and being able to travel places that when you're a kid it felt like the other side of the universe, but it was probably just down the road. But it was a really incredible experience. Also, being a fairly active kid, I couldn't really sit still, so I was into all sorts of sports, as many kids are, but cycling stayed with me. So at a young age, kind of late 70s, early 80s, I got into BMX racing. So I used to race BMXs, and that was a real start of another type of adventure on bikes. And then I progressed from BMXs onto mountain bikes and really loved just mountain biking, and then road biking. And as I grew up, I just found cycling to connect me to what I really loved doing as a kid, which is just getting out and being on a bike and the freedom of going places. And when I'm teaching kids and I'm talking to parents, I find myself sort of saying things like, cycling is amazing because it offers fun and friendship and fitness and freedom. And, these are all the wonderful things that a child will encounter even more when they learn to cycle. And, what I find very, very, very commonly when I'm doing what I'm doing is all of those things, like what happened to me, was, it gives the child even more confidence to do even more things that might be, confident to, I don't know, try abseiling, or the confidence to, ride a horse or play the piano or something like that. So it was a real catalyst for me growing up. So I think really that's my background of how I got into cycling. Like you, like probably many people listening to this podcast, we love cycling. Then there's lots of cycling to be had, whether it's velodrome or mountain biking or gravel riding or road riding. There's lots to do.
So how did you get into finding that niche, or how would you say, filling that unique gap that you found to be missing for kids? Because like I was mentioning, I have 3 kids. I taught all 3 of them how to ride. It wasn't pretty. And if most parents are listening, it's not usually the most pleasant thing trying to teach your kids how to ride a bike. Oh my gosh. I'm just glad that they are riding bikes now after it wasn't that bad. But you know what I'm talking about.
I do get it.
And yeah.
I do. I do get it. And so, how did that come about? You're asking me, how did I identify that niche? Yes.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. How did you? Yes.
So it's a really good question. So just to give you a little bit of context. So I've spent my whole life in various different jobs, and I've had lots of jobs. I've worked on the Give Kids the World program at Disney in Florida. I've been an outdoor education instructor in Northern Ontario.
What? Where?
Up in the Muskoka region up there.
No way, because I'm in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not,
I know
well,
that.
it's like maybe 3 hours from Muskoka. Oh, that's pretty interesting.
So and also I have worked for the church in inner city settings, working with very disadvantaged and at-risk children. I spent 10 years as a project manager. My job was to design and implement projects in juvenile prisons across the country.
Whoa.
So my whole there is a reason for saying all of this. So my whole life, from as back as young as being maybe 12 years old, I've been involved with sports coaching or activity coaching, or working with young people. So the working with children part of Fox Cycling was just a natural progression. I really feel very privileged to work with children. I feel very comfortable working with children, teaching and coaching. So that was that element ticked off. I love cycling. And anybody who's probably, well, maybe not, but a lot of people who's maybe listening, to this podcast, and you will know about the mechanics of what we do when we cycle, right? In the sense, and we probably don't really think about it, because a lot of us just get on our bike and we ride. But having been an MBLA mountain bike leader and instructor, having been a British cycling coach, having done lots of things around bikes and having to break those things down to understand them in terms of teaching, it made sense to me. It was so clear about the mechanics, about the process needed to learn to cycle. Knowing also, when it comes to teaching children, the need to break things down and have a simple, progressive, seamless set of principles and lesson planning, if you will. I thought that, there's not really anybody teaching people to learn to cycle, teaching children to learn to cycle. And it makes absolute complete sense to me. Some people will say, I'm just good with numbers, so I found maths really easy at school. Or somebody who's really good with their hands, they become a carpenter or an engineer. To me, it was just so super clear, the exact components that needed to be in place, the process that needed to be followed to take a children from zero to hero in a very quick time, with no hassle, with lots of fun, taking all the stress away from parents, giving everybody a great time. So more children are cycling, and therefore more families can cycle as a consequence. And that really lent into my passion, which is about, you know, all of this is about seeing people thrive. I love to see people thrive, to become the people that they were designed to be. And for me, cycling was a really big vehicle, excuse the pun, but you know, a really important vehicle in enabling me to become the person who I am. So that's kind of how I found my niche. And it was also helped at the time because in 2010, I had stopped working in the prisons that I had been working in for 10 years. I had stopped working in the prisons and I wanted to set up my own business. Now, this is going off piste a little bit, but it just adds a bit of context. Very quickly, when I was working in prisons, one of the frustrations is you couldn't measure the impact socially and economically, you know, that different projects were having on the lives of these juveniles. So when in 2010 I set up my own social impact consultancy, we went into prisons and hospitals and charities and businesses and local governments and places like that, and universities, and we measured the social and economic impact. And I did that, but it was a very new thing. So at the time I thought, as well as doing this, because I think it's really cool to have multiple revenue streams, I decided I would start Fox Cycling, because it just made sense how to get kids cycling very easily. So I ran the two businesses sort of side by side for 3 years, and realized actually Fox Cycling is really taking off and there's a real need for this, and I can absolutely see a massive vision for franchising it across the globe. And so I kind of stopped the impact measurement stuff, and I really spent a lot of time growing and testing and piloting and refining Fox Cycling.
Wow.
So
that was 10, well, where are we? God, almost 10 years ago.
yeah.
7 years ago, where you really took
So
great.
So yes. So in 2013, when I kind of stopped I started winding down a little bit my consultancy business. That's when Fox Cycling started to really take off.
Right.
To kind of put a fly in the ointment a little bit, though, in 2013, I was at the time I was also an indoor cycling instructor.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had been doing that for 3 years. And
Oh,
I was
the same.
yeah. So that had kind of a lot of things going on, like many people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll know that, you know, a lot of us can't sit down for very long, can we? So in 2013, as I was ramping up cycling, I was approached by one of my customers who came along to one of my indoor cycling classes. He was one of my customers, one of my riders. He was an entrepreneur. And he approached me and he said, look, Steve, I've got this idea. I want to stream online classes across the internet, kind of similar to what Peloton are doing right now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's what we started doing. So in 2013, we set up this business that streamed indoor cycling classes online, and it was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. And then I came up with an idea what would be really cool to add to the experience. I'm kind of going off piece a little bit about Fox, but there is a bit of context to it, you know. Just very quickly, I thought I'd add a little bit of add to the experience of this online class by actually filming it in a real studio. So I set up my own indoor cycling studio, similar to what you've done.
Oh, okay.
In the past. And what was very cool about that is it enabled me to generate a fairly good income from my indoor cycling studio, as well as then building Fox Cycling. That enabled me to pilot Fox Cycling in many different places around the UK, because I wanted to make sure that the model was really watertight.
Right.
And I wanted to refine the process. I wanted to deliver it in lots of different settings, and so that's what I did. So while I was running my indoor cycling studio, and that was going great, I was really being able to get out there and test fox cycling and teaching children to cycle across the country, to give me confidence that it was a franchisable model, and it is.
Whoa. So now, are you able to do teach the kids year round, or do you end up taking a break?
No, that's a really great question. That's a really
Because
great
I
question.
know Canada, well, I guess it depends. Certain parts of the country, or maybe even like in the UK, there's like a season that nobody really wants to be outside unless you're inside.
Not
Unless
really.
you produce something.
No, and let me explain that. So while I was running the indoor cycling studio and really able to experiment and refine further this model that I had, one of the questions I asked myself is, well, how do I make this a year-round business model?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the mechanics, the process, the components of a child learning to cycle, and what I learned from that kind of revealed to me the business model that we needed to follow. So I'll explain that. So when I started back in 2010, I started with cycle tots, which is group balance bike sessions with kids between the age of about 2.5 up to about 4.5, indoors on balance bikes, giving them the foundation that they need to seamlessly move on to pedals. That's what it was. Okay. But because I could see how easy it was to teach a child to cycle in an hour, I used to get to some parents who came to me back in 2010 say to me, hey, Steve, I really love the idea of coming along to Cycle Tots, but I'm going on holiday next week as a family and my child can't cycle. And I want them cycling for when we go on holiday, so we can cycle together when we're on holiday.
Yeah, right.
What can you do for me? So
you're like,
but when they started asking me that, I thought, well, that's cool, because I think I can easily teach your kid in an hour. And so what happened is very, very quickly, word got around that I could teach children in an hour. So that was the part of the business model that really skyrocketed very quickly.
Oh, okay. Is it like one-on-ones?
Yes, the one-on-ones. That's where we teach children in less than an hour. So that kind of took off really quickly. And the Cycle Tots element, the group element, although I was still doing it, I didn't have so much time to do that because I was so busy teaching one-to-ones and running my indoor cycling studio that the Cycle Tots kind of, it just kind of ticked along. But what I did, but what I discovered is this, and this is going to answer your question. When it comes to a child being ready for pedals, what I've picked up over 10 years, 12 years of doing this, and having taught thousands of kids to cycle, there are some very key components that I've learnt, and this is one of them.
All right, I'm ready.
When it comes to a child learning to cycle, and this might be obvious to some of our listeners, there's two parts to it. Number one, the child needs to be physically ready for pedals. Yes, and that means that they need to be able to balance, obviously. And a balance bike, or I think what you guys in North America call a strider, is that right? Yeah, is the only way for a child to learn the components of learning how to balance. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is the cognitive readiness. And the cognitive readiness is having the child's ability to be able to do everything at once. So that's being able to apply their balance, as well as being able to pedal, as well as be able to steer, look forwards, not pick their nose, not look at seagulls, decide which direction they're going, and do all those multiple things, right?
Yep.
And quite often what I find is parents will come to me and they will say, my child is amazing on a balance bike. Their balance is fantastic. They're like a little rocket. Obviously, they're ready for pedals. And quite often, particularly if they're between the age of 2.5 and 5, cognitively, they won't be ready for pedals. So they need to spend a little bit more time on the balance bike. Because if you put them onto pedals, they can't do both things at once. So they just fall off. If they fall off, they don't like going back on the bike. They stay on the scooter and they never, you know,
That's interesting.
It's not until they're about 7 or 8 years old do they dare to give the bike another shot. Yes.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, I got a Strider or a balance bike, and my 2 daughters never liked it. My son was all over the place on it. And like, we had to literally pull him off of it when he got too big for it. We're like, okay, you're dragging your knees basically on the ground. Like, this is a little, we need to advance you. But yeah, and I waited a bit too. I didn't try and get them too early, but yeah, you're right on the ages for sure.
Yeah. So I guess I'm this is a very long way of answering your question. I don't want to keep it too long, but there's some really important parts that
no, but this is important.
Okay, so what I recognized is that there is the physical readiness and the cognitive readiness. And if you put a child onto a pedal bike before they are cognitively ready as well as physically ready, it's not going to happen. So keeping children on balance bikes as part of cycle tots is a really advantageous process, because not only do kids really learn well from copying other kids, which cycle tots offers because it's a group experience, the socialization element of cycle tots is also very good, because the way that we do it, we build in lots of social and emotional development exercises, fun and games. We do lots of numeracy and literacy stuff. So all that is being developed while they're having fun on a balance bike. So in answer to your question, is it a year-round thing? Well, the good thing about our business model is, you know, if it does get a little bit quieter during the winter months, which is when we are outside doing our one-to-one sessions, we've always got a whole load of cycle tot sessions going on. So that is what really maintains that revenue. Do you follow?
I got it. Yep.
Yes. And at the same time, actually, you're doing those kids a favor, because they are continuing to build their confidence and their ability and their cognitive readiness on the balance bike. So when summer comes around, or spring, they are going to be far more physically and cognitively ready to move on to a pedal bike. And then they graduate from cycle tots into cycle kids, which is our one-to-one session. And that's when we get them cycling an hour. But that said, our one-to-one sessions are also very busy throughout the winter. I'm outside as I am today. You can still see I'm pretty wrapped up.
Is it cold?
Yeah, I mean, I've been outside teaching all day, because, you know, it's a busy time. So in answer to your question, fox cycling is busy all year round, because we have cycle tots, we have cycle kids, and then of course the third part of our business model is that we sell bikes.
Yes.
And that is the icing on the cake.
I love this concept.
So the customer journey, if you will, is a parent will contact us. Their child will be maybe 2.5 years old. They will come along to cycle tots. They will they will work through a learning journey with us. I don't have one to show you, I don't think at the moment, but they work through a learning journey where they learn all the components of striding and gliding. We are constantly assessing their physical and their cognitive readiness. And then when they are ready for pedals, they leave cycle tops, they go on to cycle kits. Within the hour, they get cycling, and then we sell parents a bike and usually a helmet. So it's not uncommon for, you know, the customer value for one person is probably around about £500 to £600, which is very good. And then of course their siblings will do the same, and their friends do the same. So for every child that I teach to cycle, I sell roughly 2.5 bikes. Figure that out.
I love it. So that's the really interesting component to this, that when I was looking at your program. And now, how do you get these bikes? And have you built up a good partnership with a local shop? Or yeah.
Okay. So yes, in answer, the very quick answer to your question is, have you guys heard of Isla bikes or frog bikes?
No.
Okay.
I haven't.
Let's bring this right the way back to the beginning. So in answer to your question, we have a partnership with a bike manufacturer. Okay.
Bike manufacturer.
Yeah. And we sell those bikes.
Right.
But let me add a bit of color to this, and you guys listening, if you're still listening, you might find this interesting. So, of all the thousands of kids that I have taught, there are 3 reasons why kids are not cycling when they could be. Okay.
Yep.
And in the UK, bearing in mind that 50% of 6-year-olds cannot cycle. I don't know what it is in North America, but to me in the UK, that's alarming. 50% of 6-year-old children cannot cycle. And for my experience,
probably about the same.
For my experience, it is for these 3 reasons. Okay. And your listeners, you guys, you might find this interesting. So here we go. Number one barrier to a child not being pedal ready: stabilizers, or training wheels, as you call them.
Oh.
Yeah, they are the nemesis of any child learning to cycle.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain this in depth, because like I can think, like, if you're like our listeners here, if you got kids on balance wheels, I know mine started on them, and it was like nightmare. Yeah, so tell us why.
I will give you the whole spiel. So
give us a whole spiel, Steve.
Number 1, stabilizers. Number 2, the bike. Number 3, the parents. Seriously. So let me
I can do it, like I just scare my kids to not get on the bike, and then I have to like threaten
pedal. So here you go. Here's let me explain those things, because some of you guys listening might be going, yeah, I don't agree with that, and that's cool. But let me share with you my experience. So the reason I'm telling you this is number 2 barrier to a child learning to cycle is the bike. So there's no point of teaching a child to cycle if they are trying to cycle on a bike that is really, really poor. In the same way, is if I said to you guys who are listening, I want you to run the London Marathon or the Boston Marathon, but I want you to do it in a pair of scuba fins. You're just not going to do it, are you? It's just going to be an awful experience. Or you need to run it in a pair of stiletto heels. You know?
Some ladies might take you up on
they
that,
might do
maybe
that, right?
not for a marathon.
But hey,
But I
the
get
thing
you.
is, but the thing is,
And
you need the right tools for the job.
yeah.
100%. So the bike is super important, and that is why us selling bikes is an imperative part of our business model. So I will unpack that a little bit more. So our business model, just to recap: cycle tots, group balance bike sessions; cycle kids, one-to-one learn to cycle in an hour; number 3, sell a bike. That's our business model, 3 revenue streams. Okay. Yeah. So the 3 reasons why kids are not pedaling when they could be: training wheels, the bike, and parents. So let me explain why those are the case. This might enlighten some people.
Oh, I'm sure I've been there on
You
probably all
have.
three. All 3.
So why are stabilizers so bad? Well, stabilizers, of course, do not teach balance. That's why they're called stabilizers. Make sense? It's like teaching your kid to swim with armbands. If you take the armbands off, they probably can't swim, so they're going to sink. Yes. So taking your stabilizers or your training wheels off the bike, with exceptions, and there are always exceptions, but for the most part, from my experience, the kid's just going to fall off because they've never learned to balance. So that's the first problem with stabilizers. Okay. The second problem with stabilizers is that children, like adults, will always go towards the path of least resistance. And so what happens is stabilizers promote backwards pedaling or half cranking, because the child doesn't need to generate their own momentum to move forward. So they can just sit there really lazy, do a bit of backwards pedaling, do a bit of forwards pedaling. So when the parents take the stabilizers off, they think that pedaling is a little bit of backwards pedaling and a little bit of forwards pedaling. And of course, if you do that, you're going to fall off. So they don't learn to pedal properly. All right. So here's the kicker. This is the third one, and this is the real kicker and the issue with training wheels and why they really don't work. So everybody, picture this in your mind's eye. Okay, picture this. Your child is on a bike with training wheels. They're in front of you and you're walking behind them. So they're trundling along on their bike with stabilizers, and they want to turn, for example, left. On a bike with stabilizers, the only way that you can turn is by literally turning the handlebars, which of course on a real bike you never do. You lean to turn on a real bike. You don't turn the handlebars like this. You lean to turn.
Oh my God.
So picture this. Your child is on a bike with stabilizers in front of you. They want to turn left. You're watching them from behind as they literally turn the handlebars to the left. Their right hand has to follow the right part of the handlebar around, which means their right arm extends. And as their right arm extends, their body moves to the right, which means they're learning to lean out of the turn rather than into the turn. Do you follow that?
Yeah.
And so when you put them on a bike without stabilizers and they need to turn, the first thing they do is they lean the wrong way and fall off. Which is why I have lots of parents who say to me when they call and inquire about what we do, I always ask them lots of questions, and I will ask them, so what's your child doing? And their parents will say, well, they're kind of cycling. And I say to them, well, does that mean they can cycle in a straight line? And they say, yes, they can cycle in a straight line, but when they come to turn, they fall off. Because of course, if you pedal fast enough with enough gusto, you can probably pedal in a straight line until you get to a wall or car or cliff edge. But if you need to turn, it ain't happening.
Oh my God. I'm just picturing my kids. And also it provides a little false sense of security.
Correct.
But the thing is that when it falls off that flat surface, your kid's down on the ground. That's happened many times on the road, you know, when the road circles, it goes down onto the gravel and they're no longer flat. They're like this and they fall over and then they don't want to get back on your bike again.
So here's the thing. Right? So here's the thing. So just kind of going off piste again a little bit here. So one of the wonders of a balance bike is the child is not restricted. They're not locked into the bike like you get with training wheels. They have freedom to move. When we teach a child to cycle, and I'm always giving commentary to the parents, I say to them things like this. So I give really daft analogies, but they kind of make sense in my head, right? So I think, and this is what I say to parents when their child is using a balance bike for the first time and their child looks really awkward on the balance bike, because of course, when a child first uses a balance bike, they will generally walk with it between their legs. And when they decide finally they're going to put their bum on the seat, it will still look quite awkward. They will look very disjointed. The parents will get frustrated. They want to get to the shops or to get to the school faster. So they tell their kid to get off the balance bike. They end up carrying the balance bike and the kid is running on behind because everybody's late for wherever they need to get to, right? So when I'm teaching a child, I will say to the parents something like this. Learning to cycle is a little bit like dancing. So if you look at somebody who can dance and somebody who can't, like me, yeah, somebody who can dance, they move and they move seamlessly to the beat of the music, right? Their body moves freely and it's in tune and it's in beat and it looks rhythmic and it looks gracious and beautiful. And then you look at me, who, when I try to dance, I look like Frankenstein having a bad day. Yeah, kind of not in room, not in beat with the music. You know, my body is out of sync. I look awkward. I look stiff and uncomfortable. What a balance bike does that a bike with stabilizers will never do is it allows the child to feel the beat and the rhythm of a bike, which we feel without realizing it when we are cycling. It moves in a particular way. So using a balance bike enables the child to get that foundation in place where they start understanding how it moves. They move with it, they start to relax, then they start finding their balance. So learning to cycle is a bit like learning to dance. You follow me?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also use the analogy that learning to cycle is much like building a house. And this is where this is where a lot of parents get it wrong. Whether and forgive me parents if you're listening to this, and you know,
No.
and you're not going to like what I'm about to say, and I mean it with love, and I mean it with and it comes from a position of trying to be helpful.
Well, I'll be ready for the spring anyways.
So here we go. So from my experience, parents want to go from point A to point Z without doing without doing the bit in between, because often the kid next door is already cycling and they want their kid to be cycling so they can say my kid is as good as your kid, right? So what parents do is they don't want to go in for the hard work. They go and buy a bike before the child has learned to cycle, which is never the right way to do it, and I'll come back to that in a minute. They go to the park, they run behind, they hold the saddle, and they expect a miracle to happen, and it's not going to happen. They don't want to put in the hard yards of getting the foundation in place in the same way as if you build a house without the correct foundation, the pretty bit that we all like to see will fall over. Yeah. So what we do at Fox through Cycle Tots and through Cycle Kids, our one-to-one and our group sessions, is we get that foundation down solid. The bit that's not sexy, the bit that takes a bit of time, the bit that parents generally are not interested in because they can't brag to their, to their friends as much that their kids are brilliant on a bike. And I mean that, again, with sort of absolute love. So once you get the foundation down, actually the rest of it looks after itself. And that's why a balance bike is so much better than a bike with stabilizers. So that's the reason why stabilizers are so bad. And if anybody is listening to this and you don't think about anything else and you don't take anything else away from this podcast, please take away that training wheels are the worst. Do not use them. Don't go anywhere near them. Okay.
Yeah, so everybody who went bought their kids a bike for Christmas,
So
take the
here's
wheels, take the
so here's the
training
thing.
wheels off.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Let me carry on. Let me carry on. So we said that stabilizers was the first barrier. The second
Mhm.
barrier I said was the bike. Yes. So let's
Yep.
unpack that a little bit. As you know, we sell bikes. We sell bikes to people. We sell lots of bikes to people who don't even have their children do our courses because they've already learned to cycle and they just want to buy a bike. Yes. So we get
Mhm.
lots of people who call me and they say, I want to buy a bike. The first question I ask anybody who calls me who wants to buy a bike is, can your child cycle? Quite often, the parent will say to me, no, my child cannot cycle. And then what I say in a very polite way is, why are you buying a bike? Because what's the point of having a pedal bike if your child can't cycle? Because you can only do two things with it. Number one, put training wheels on it. And we've just established that that's not the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Or it sits in the garage because they can't use it. And by the time that they are ready to cycle, often the bike that the parents have bought is too small. So you've wasted your money. And
Mm.
often, and also, how do you know what bike you need if your child can't cycle it? That's like me saying to you, go and buy a pair of shoes without trying them on. You're not going to be sure that they're the right size or they're the right fit or the right comfort level. The only way you can know if a child is ready, is getting the right bike is for them to cycle it, because they'll tell you whether they
Mhm.
like it or not. So that's
Right.
one element to think about when it comes to buying the bike. I asked you earlier on, I asked you earlier on, I asked you earlier on, have you heard of Frog or Isla bikes?
Yep.
So and you said no, you hadn't. So they are for sale in Canada and in North America, but they're
Oh.
not. They are, but they're not as popular as what they are over here because they are both a British company. But anyway,
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
here's the meat to what I'm trying to say. There is a massive difference. There is a massive difference between what I call a kid's bike and a child-specific bike. So
Oh.
a kid's bike is a bike that parents will go and I'm trying to think of the North American equivalent here. So a kid's bike is the bike that you'll tend to buy from somewhere like Canadian Tire.
Yep.
Yeah. A
Yep.
bike that's really heavy, really
Mhm.
clunky, bad
Mhm.
components, poor gearing, bad Q factor, bad geometry,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
and it's more like a toy bike. It's probably got a superhero sticker on it, like Batman or Hello Kitty or something like this. Yeah.
No, ours doesn't. But we did buy a Canadian Tire bike only. Okay, my son does know how to cycle, only because there was nothing left.
Yeah.
And that was like beginning of last summer. And he grew out of his other bike.
Right.
And so I was only left with like a couple options. But I get you.
Yeah.
It does make a huge difference. And even when I go bike shopping with some ladies who are first timers and they want to buy a new bike, I'm like, I ask them, I go, what's your budget? Because that is going to dictate your comfort, your level of comfort on the bike as well as your growth on the bike. Like you will get that bike, and I hate to say it, if you come to the club, you're going to look around, and by the end of the summer you're going to want to upgrade it,
Yeah. Yeah.
hands down. So you might as well spend $1,200, get a good entry level bike that you will probably ride for say 3 to 5 years. And then
Yeah.
once you determine you really love biking and you want to do something more serious, then you put down the $3,000 to $5,000 on a bike. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you're gonna grow out of it. You're gonna like not like physically, skill wise. skill wise, you're going to grow out of it. You're going to, you're going to want something better as soon as you
I
come
get it.
into the club.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
So one parent explained it to me once. They referred to it as a toy bike, like a Christmas cracker bike. And and I think that's right. So the reason why I am, very confident that the bike is barrier number 2 to a child being ready for pedals is because every day that I'm teaching a child to cycle, and with our business model, we provide a lightweight child specific bike. So
Nice.
a lightweight child specific bike is what it says on the tin. It's lightweight. It's designed specifically for children in mind. So correct weight, correct geometry, correct hue factor, correct gearing, close reach brakes,
Right. Yeah.
all of the stuff. Yes. So
Yeah.
this is what happens. We teach a child to cycle in less than an hour. Generally, the parents are crying because they've been trying for 3 or 4 years, and suddenly their kid is now cycling in about an hour, or less than an hour, sorry. So they're thinking, well, what's happened there? That's amazing. The child is having the time of their life, and like you said at the beginning, when we started talking this evening, when you see people learn to cycle, it really does something. It's an emotional experience, isn't it? Because they're just starting on their journey. So anyway, all this wonderful emotion is happening. Parents and kids are high-fiving. It's a great experience. And we invite parents to bring their Canadian Tire bike with them to the session. Okay. Because one of the things that we offer as part of the Learn to Cycle session is a suitability and safety check of the bike that they own. Yeah. Right. So
that's a good way to see their bike.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the bikes that kids have, they are great, they're fine, but a lot of the time they're not. And so this is what tends to happen. The child is cycling around on one of our bikes and thinking, wow, cycling is amazing.
They look at their bike, they're like, I'm not getting on that thing again.
Well, this is the thing. So what dad normally says, because it's normally dad, he says, hey, this is amazing. Do you mind if my child has a ride on their bike, the one that we brought with us today? And I say, sure. So they get on it and they cannot cycle. They can't cycle. They cannot cycle. And then the kid's getting really frustrated because about 5 seconds ago, they were happily cycling around. And the parents are seeing this firsthand. They're scratching their head thinking, well, this is bizarre. I thought a bike was a bike. And at that point, they say, Steve, can I buy a bike?
Yeah.
And I say, yes, of course you can buy a bike. So that's what completes.
Right over here.
There you go. And that's what completes our business model, you see?
Yeah. That happened to me. Yeah. Like,
in what sense?
Well, so I signed my son up for mountain bike camp, and we rented one of their bikes because I knew our bike wasn't going to cut it. Like you said, it's a Canadian Tire bike. And so after the week, I'm like, okay, let's go for a ride. And he's just like looked at his bike. This is before I got the other one. The other one was crappy, like really crappy. He's like, I'm not getting on that bike. That bike's not la 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 la. I'm just like, oh, but he's so right. And I know it because I'm a cycling coach, and I'm like, I get it. Poor quality. You have such a horrible experience when you get on something that is really good quality and it works and it shifts and it's like the good size. And I'm like, yeah. And he pulled such a fit. And I was like,
there you go. Yeah.
But I honestly didn't think he was going to get into it that much. And that's another thing as a parent, you're like, I don't want to spend all that money if my kid's not going to. But knowing full well we can sell it.
That's the thing. So just on that, and it might be interesting just to mention this. So I get parents who say this to me all the time. They say, I don't want to go and buy a child specific bike because it's more expensive. I'd rather just go to Canadian Tire because it would only be about $150. So, and I get that. I get that. One of the reasons why the selling of bikes is a really strong part of our business model is because those child specific bikes have got extremely good resale value. So the second, and particularly now, obviously, because it's been a bit difficult getting bikes anyway, but normally anyway, they've got very good resale value. So what I say to parents, and again, parents, this might be something to think about who are listening. If you go to someone like Canadian, and also, hey, let me just lay this down. I get it. We're all on a budget, right? We're all on a budget, and that is a very real consideration. So I get that. If we go to Canadian Tire or Halfords or Argos, which is an equivalent in our country in the UK, go and buy a bike for $150. The kid is probably not going to cycle it because it's too heavy and it's too clunky. They're not going to enjoy riding it, so they'd rather go on their scooter. And then you're going to have to sell it, or they might ride it. They might ride it, or they will ride it and they just get used to it. And then when it comes to selling it, if you're lucky, you might get 10 or 20 bucks for it. So it's actually cost you 150 bucks or 150 pounds. If you buy a child specific bike, yes, you're going to be paying maybe 400 bucks, but actually when you come to sell it, you're going to sell it for probably about 250, 300 bucks, because that's what they go for. So it's actually cost you less than a Canadian Tire bike. And at the same time, your child has had an amazing bike to fall even more in love with cycling, to feel even more confident to jump off pavements and ride up, ride up steps and do crazy stuff that kids do on bikes. So you're just really, giving them the right tools. So, and then of course, the third barrier to a child being ready for pedals, and I mean this with all the love in the world, and it's always done with the right intention, is the parents, because it's the parents. Okay. It's the parents who go, with all the right intentions, they go and they buy the training wheels, they go to Canadian Tire, they don't do that bit in between. They decide to go to the park. They say today's the day we're going to take the training wheels off. They hold the saddle, which is what you should never do. They run behind and break their back. The child is then launched off into the sunset. The parent, with all the hope in the world, is saying, go and enjoy cycling. And then the child, after around about 2 revolutions, if they pedal at all, will fall off.
You forgot holding the shirt.
Holding the shirt, right.
That was me.
Yeah.
And then I slowly let go and I'm like, oh, you're riding. But
and then they go to turn and lean the wrong way and fall off.
A lot to get there. Yeah.
And then they go, yes. Do you know what? They go, do you know what, Mum? I don't want to do that again. And Mum says, oh, come on, I'll buy you a McDonald's. So then they get on again, and the same thing happens. And they go, for as many McDonald's as you like, I'm not going to get back on that bike. And then they go to their scooter, and they spend, their years from probably 4 or 5 years old on a scooter until they're about 7 or 8. And at 8 years old, they're getting a little bit more conscious about their friends cycling. So then they say, do you know what, Mum and Dad, I want to give it another bash. And that's when the parents either do exactly the same as what they did 4 years ago, or they come to us and then we get them cycling in an hour. And that's when parents cry, because they think, wow, we tried this for 4 years and you've just done it in 35 minutes.
That's, being a parent, and I know you're a parent too. I'm trusting you're a parent, but been there, done that. And I'm sure if there are parents listening right now, we're probably all crying together, because that's exactly how it all went down. And some of us are probably lucky to have actually gotten our kids back on bikes, and that now we can ride as a family to the ice cream store, to the beach, to, and do little things, and just keep them engaged in cycling until they get their license. So,
so you're right. And so here's the thing, right? So I do speak with some parents, okay, because there are always exceptions, and I'm sure some of our wonderful listeners, if they're still listening to me, who, some of our wonderful listeners of this podcast, they're probably saying to themselves, whoa, Steve, hang on a second. You know, I get what you're saying, but actually my child learned to ride only using training wheels and they're cycling now. And do you know what? That's amazing. And I love that. And I'm really glad they are,
Mhm.
because you always get exceptions. But I do speak with quite a number of parents who say to me, well, you know, they say, you know, Steve, my parents use stabilizers, so that's what I used for my child. And actually they learned to cycle, and they learned to cycle. And then I asked them, are they cycling now? And a lot of the time they say no, they're not, because stabilizers do not give that foundational confidence and ability. So probably as soon as the child was left to have that own choice, their decision was, actually, I don't want to keep cycling, because I still find it a little bit discouraging. I find it, you know, quite difficult, because stabilizers is not giving them that foundation they need. Do you follow what I'm saying? So what
Mhm.
cycling is about, of course, we're about, you know, enabling children to learn to cycle in a fun and seamless way, so they love cycling, and here it is, continue to love cycling. And
Mhm.
if it's not done properly, they won't continue to love cycling. They'll be off a bike before, you know, given half the chance, and they'll just, you know, do something different. And I want
Mhm.
kids to continue love cycling, because we know it's amazing,
It's
right?
amazing. It's amazing. They can use it, later on to go to, their sporting events and ride with friends. And you know what ah, I really love this. So I'm in a small community in the country, and a lot of the kids have bikes. And so I grew up on a bike on a farm road. So it wasn't quite the same thing, but the cool thing I love seeing is them biking together as a group to go to the park, and it's safe. And like, I mean, as parents, we shouldn't feel so scared about our kids going off and riding. And the fun thing is that, just like, not now, 'cause it's right, but like early in the spring, in the fall, like we were just, right after school, and there's a knock on the door, and I go, and one of my son's friends from school had biked over, and I was just like, I had no idea who this kid was. I'm like, there's a kid on a bike, and he wants to go biking with you. I'm like, how cool is that? Get the hell off the couch and get outside. And because I saw
Nice.
them coming up, I'm like, hey, those are kids on the bike. And I'm like, does anybody know that kid? I don't know that kid. I knew him when he was a baby,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm just like, oh my God, you can come over anytime, and and then they would bike off down the road to see some other friends, and they would get on their bikes. And I'm just like,
Amazing.
that's the way it should be. I'm like,
Amazing.
I was just like crying. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, whoa, he came over on his bike, and they went off and biked together and played outside. And I'm like, that's what it
So
needs
here's
to be like.
So here's the thing. When we were chatting before we started the podcast, you talked about
Hmm.
teaching adults.
Hmm.
I find quite what happens quite a lot indeed, is that once we teach the child to cycle, parents who haven't learned to cycle, and there are definitely quite a few of those,
Hmm.
now need to learn to cycle because they want to cycle with their child. So
Yeah.
we do teach lots of parents to cycle, and we
Oh,
follow exactly the same process. We do it in
yeah.
exactly the same way as we teach a child. And they, you know, and because a parent is generally, and I mean this kind of tongue in cheek, but generally a little bit more cognitively ready than
Yeah.
than a child,
A little stronger in the
or
legs.
you know, or you hope so. Um, you know, they get it really quickly, and you know, it's a wonderful thing, because I cycle, you know, around this area where I live, and quite often when I'm out riding, I will see the children who fox cycling taught, and
Aw.
parents that we taught, and we see them having absolute wonderful time on bikes. And you know, some recognize me and sometimes they don't, because I'm, you know, in different kits
In
or
your
whatever.
kit,
And
glasses.
yeah, and but you know, it's a wonderful thing. And when they do see me, they go, hey, there's Mr. Fox, Mr. Fox, we like this.
Oh.
And you know, and it's just a wonderful thing. So there you go. In terms of the franchise, I don't know if some of your listeners are thinking about, you know, sort of kind of how the franchise works. Cycle Tots, we deliver Cycle Tots in nurseries, in schools, in leisure centres, community centres. We run multiple classes across the territory every day, every week. And
I love it.
yeah, and Cycle Talks is really great for all the reasons I've already explained. And what's also very good about it is I can get in front of a parent when their kid is 2.5 years old before the parent goes off to Canadian Tire and starts doing all the wrong things. So it's about educating the parents as much about, you know, giving the kids a wonderful time. And then of course we've got the cycle kids. We've got the model to sell the bikes, and you know, no one else is doing this. Our process is very seamless. It's extremely watertight. It's got very, very good return on investments. It's got incredible social value, you know, social impact, and you know, we want to take it across the planet, and we want to find people, and this is the really important bit. We want to find the correct people to be on our journey, you know, and they have to be the correct people. We've had lots of people inquire, and you know, they're not always the right people, right? And
so with go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
No, you finish, and then I'll interject.
So it was interesting. So a couple of years ago, I had a mother whose child I taught, and as a job, she was some kind of management consultant, some sort of business development consultant. And she was really over the moon with the experience that she had with Fox, which is always nice to hear. And what she offered was to go away and to document her experience. And she put it into a matrix that we call the Fox Way. And the Fox Way really is our ethos and our values, our customer journey, the things that we find that we hold very important, that were not written by me, they were written by this lady. And I accepted her offer to do that because I was super curious to find out what she experienced and how that aligned with what I hope people experience. You know, having worked for the Disney Corporation in Florida, you know, I really get the whole customer service thing. I spent some time at the Disney University, and
sorry, but I can't laugh because look at Disney. I mean, I'm sure there's a
it's hilarious, but no question, they are very good at the customer experience, you know, for all the plastic and all the, you know, of all the other stuff. They are brilliant. So anyway, this Fox Way that we have is what underpins, you know, our whole model. And when we are looking for the right people to join us in the journey, you know, we see how they align with the Fox Way. And there's this very interesting book that I read a while ago. It's called Good to Great. It's written by a chap called Jim Collins. Probably a lot of our listeners, and maybe you've heard about it. It's a very common text, particularly if you're doing an MBA. And he talks about a number of principles. And, you know, one of the principles he talks about is the hedgehog effect, the hedgehog principle. And I think it's a really daft sort of analogy. But basically what he's saying is a hedgehog is really brilliant at being a hedgehog, and it's really good at one thing, and that's screwing itself up in a ball. Yeah. And in business, we should find what we're world class at and just focus on that.
Yes.
Like a hedgehog is just really good at being a hedgehog because it screws itself up and nobody can get to it. Nobody can kill it. Not a fox, not a wolf. Maybe a truck can ride over it, but that's a different story, right? But you know what I mean, right? I think we get the picture.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, with my women's cycling club, like, you know,
it's your purpose, right?
Yeah.
It's what you're made to do. It's what you're made to
Mhm.
do. And what also Jim Collins goes on to say is he talks about getting the wrong people off the bus, the right
Oh.
people on the bus, and the right
Mhm.
people in the right seats. And I think what
Right.
and you know, this is, I guess, if you think about it, it's pretty basic stuff, you
Mhm.
know, and I guess it's what every business is
Yeah.
doing. Wouldn't you agree? Go ahead.
Yeah, but sometimes we're going to draw this to a close soon, but sometimes the wrong people stay in the wrong positions or in the wrong company too long because people are afraid of getting rid of them. And also there are some people who, and I'm just talking because there's just an incident coming into our club, and and we've we've had where there are people who not rock the boat, but um the balance starts being off in the whole can't think of what I'm thinking about, can't say what I'm thinking about, but the our club is like a non-judgment, it's like everybody's should feel
The
comfortable, and
dynamic,
when
are you
people
thinking of the
the night
dynamic?
that yeah the dynamic starts shifting because of this one or two people, it's usually just one, and it's felt by number of people, and we've had to ask people to leave,
Yeah,
and it's a quiet exit, it's not a full-blown exit, but they have clearly the things are shifting and they're causing unrest in the club, and it's like one of those rotten apples, they just have to leave. Great
yeah,
people, just not great for us.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when they leave, like the harmony of the club is being compromised,
yeah. Yeah, so you've got
and
to get
they
the
have
wrong
to leave.
people. You've got to get the wrong
Yeah.
people off the bus. And you know, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what I have found with my business, and probably other people have found this, it's probably not a an uncommon thing, is sometimes you find the right person, but you're not
Mm-hmm.
quite sure what seat they should be in.
Mm,
But you get them on the bus anyway, and they just come along for the ride. They're standing in the aisle probably for a while because you're not quite sure where they should sit. But it's great that you've got them and you've not left them behind, because you know
yeah.
that you're going to need them, as part of your team at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they do is they just come along for the journey and they join in, but you're still trying to find the exact match. And the Fox way that we use helps us do that, because you know it's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege to work with
Mm-hmm.
children. Children are amazing. um it's a real honor and a lot of fun to teach children to connect with cycling and to have an impact in a family's life. And it's a very certain person that is able is able to do that. And I'm not talking about understanding the mechanics of how
Yeah.
to deliver the process that we have developed. It's about the emotional intelligence, the social intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to work with children and also to deal with adults.
Right.
It's about unconditional positive regard. It's about
Mm-hmm.
empathy, all of those softer, really important traits. Do you follow?
Right. I totally. So with that, um, we are going to have to call us a day. And this has been amazing. It's been a great, I haven't talked to a business like this yet in the cycling world. And I'm glad that I found you. And I'm glad, Steve, that you're on the podcast. And thank you to our listeners for jumping in. Now,
Yes.
before we go, where can people find Fox Cycling?
Sure. So obviously we have a website.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you've asked that question, because what I was going to say is, I am passionate about seeing kids love cycling, and I want to do everything I can to enable that to happen. So you listeners, if you have any questions, if you're scratching your head about anything, please reach out to me. And you can reach out to me by either uh, uh, emailing me, And my email address is Stephen with a V at foxcycling, all one word lowercase, .co.uk. You will find my email address on our website, which is foxcycling.co.uk. We've also got Facebook, Fox Cycling. You can see the logo here. You see the logo, so you'll know you're looking at the right place if you see this logo. This is our logo, Fox Cycling. This is Mr. Fox, and he has a bunch of friends, which you'll see. You've got Ozzy the ostrich, Eddie the eagle, Molly the monkey, Tommy the tortoise, and all of that stuff. So that's how you can contact me, and I'd love to hear from people because, you know, parents do scratch their heads a little bit on what to do next, and I'd love to help, you know, help you move forward. Keep pedaling.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this episode. And thanks a lot, Stephen, for being an amazing guest.
Thank you for having me. All good. Keep pedaling,
great.
folks.
Yes.
Keep
Don't forget to get out and ride with your kids. And don't forget to go in and give us a review and a 5-star on Apple Podcast. Have an amazing one.
Take care.